Through Time into Healing is Dr. Brian Weiss's second book. It follows his first book, Many Lives, Many Masters, that details his own personal revelation of discovering past life regression while he was trying to practice hypnotherapy with a client. And it was through hypnosis and regression that Weiss and his clients had a series of transcendent experiences. In the aftermath and integration of that, Weiss discovers other paths to similar revelations, and he spends about a third of his book discussing the similarities and support that he gets from the related realm of near-death experience research. So this review of Through Time into Healing will focus only on that third of the book. So this review is of interest to people interested in past lives and those interested in near-death experiences. Hi, I'm Mark Beale. I'm a past life regression therapist, a hypnotherapist, and a certification trainer. And I'm the author of the book, Past Life Awakening, 7 Regression Case Studies Illustrate 7 Spiritual Laws, which you can get as a paperback, ebook, or Kindle from bookstores. Check the links in the description. Near-death experiences are relevant in many ways. One is because they helped Weiss gain an inner acceptance of what was happening to him, albeit through a different means, and that encouragement was enough for him to take a reputational risk and publish his first book in 1988. In that book, he discussed looking into reports and other scientific records that could help him find evidence of outer acceptance for unorthodox experience, which led to him coming out publicly with his unorthodox material. Now, his discovery of NDEs is only revealed in his second book, published 4 years later in 1992. And this theme of looking for acceptance continues and goes to another level. In his first book, Brian felt a little alone and that he was taking a risk in some of his revelations. This book has an introduction written by Dr. Raymond A. Moody, who is a psychiatrist and author, famed for his books that coined the term Near Death Experience, or NDEs, and that fame began when he published his first book in 1975 called Life After Life. So with that book, Brian feels that he has some backup, and with Moody providing the foreword to his second book, he's no longer alone. He has another medical colleague, one who's already gone out on a limb to present unorthodox material in a related field 13 years before him. Dr. Moody was also criticized for it, but he too got support from other doctors. So in Weiss's book, Through Time into Healing, we can note that he himself has gone through time. He's gone through 4 years of having been a published author and putting himself out there with unorthodox material. And he had concerns about the professional support or criticism he would receive. And he finds a kindred spirit in Moody in many ways, including his experience as an author. So in his introduction to Weiss's book, Dr. Moody says, quote, "When public interest in near-death experiences began in 1975, some dismissed it as a fad. I'm beginning to realize now, 14 years later, that the near-death experience is an established fact in our culture," end quote. So Moody claims that NDEs are an established fact, but in our culture in 1992. But to this day, the factual details of NDEs are not fully understood or universally accepted in science, even if they are widely accepted in our culture. So Dr. Moody was almost 2 decades into his journey. Weiss, on the other hand, was only a few years, and past life regression was going through a similar gradual emergence. But through this act of publishing and then publishing a second book, publishing again, Weiss is standing by his first work, he's standing by the field, and he's aware of the ongoing work needed for past life regression, like NDEs, to become a more established fact in our culture. Moody continues in his introduction, quote, "The past life regressions upon which Dr. Brian Weiss reports in this book are one example of the extraordinary phenomena of human consciousness that are now enjoying widespread acceptance. No one need feel in the least awkward or ashamed for having had such experiences," end quote. Now, it is still telling that the reason that we have to tell someone to not feel awkward or ashamed is because some do, for good reason, because of the critical responses they receive. And so these assurances are made because they're necessary antidotes. And these educative books continue to be written because they're necessary to continue to flesh out and complete the message. So as the book continues and Weiss starts to write, we note that he's had 4 years of response to his book, and he notes, quote, "After Many Lives, Many Masters was published, I was still waiting for the backlash. I was waiting for doctors to ridicule me, for my reputation to be tarnished. My fears were unfounded. Although I hear there's a stray colleague or two who's been known to mutter about poor Brian who's only got 1 foot on the curb, instead of losing friends and colleagues, I gained more. I also began to receive letters from psychiatrists and psychologists around the country who had experiences like mine, but had not dared make them public." End quote. So it's useful to know that there can and will always be 1 or 2 who mutter, but there are many more who appreciate the courage and share the sentiment. Now, a few mutterers may try to make someone feel awkward or ashamed, but if, like Weiss, you're honestly, earnestly, and purely making an authentic report, you'll get support, even if much of that remains hidden, which it would have done as Weiss received those letters from psychiatrists who would not go public. But in this case, Dr. Moody goes public and publicly supports Weiss. And Weiss himself encourages others who are sincere and face unorthodox experiences by emphasizing this, by empathizing with, quote, "the tug of war between your experiential and intellectual knowledge. Many people have the same experiences and beliefs you do. Many of those people feel discouraged from communicating their experiences. It is important to trust your experiences. Don't let the dogma and beliefs of others undermine your personal experience and perception of reality." End quote. Now, beyond just an affirming introduction from Moody, Weiss himself then writes quite a lot in this book about NDEs or near-death experiences. These have indeed gone on to become an entire genre. They have more of books and people who write about their spiritual awakening due to their NDEs. And there are people like Dr. Moody who gather this information. And his first book was made up by interviewing 2,000 people about their NDE experiences and collating the results. So there are many similarities and a brotherhood between these two practitioners. So let's have a look at the connections, some of the similarities and some of the differences between the experiences people have in their near-death experiences and the experiences people have in past life regression. So some of the differences are: 1. Near-death experiences are often a one-off, accidental, spontaneous experience in life, whereas past life regressions are a series of intentional therapeutic interactions in scheduled sessions. Secondly, NDEs rely on having a life-threatening event, so can be a bit of an exclusive club. Past life regression is accessible to many people who are willing to enter hypnosis and feel a connection with past lives. Thirdly, near-death experiences are an alone experience that happens quickly, even in a flash, but in which people feel rocketed into a dimension outside of time. Past life regression happens not alone, but guided by a therapist, and it takes place over many hours, and it can be repeatedly. So overall, near-death experience can be more instantly and overwhelmingly visceral. In past life regression, you can still get some intense viscerality, but it's not turned up to 11, and there isn't a risk of life involved. A final key difference is that many that experience near-death experiences have no past life experience in their near-death experience. So to many in near-death experiences, past lives are not relevant. And for many into past life regression, near-death experiences aren't particularly relevant if they've never happened to them. Now let's look at some similarities, and there are 2 core similarities. The first one, they are transformative. People that experience them tend to get a paradigm shift and a values shift. And this is often a shift away from conventional scientific materialism to a felt spirituality. As Dr. Moody says, due to a near-death experience, quote, they then open up to a sense of transcendent reality, end quote. Now this is a characteristic of many or all spiritual experiences. So these events can often be a great challenge to our existing beliefs. For Brian Weiss, the day that his client Catherine went into past lives and between lives, and then the master spoke through her in past life regression, for him that was like a near-death experience. That was an overwhelming visceral event, and his life would never be the same again. Because when we open up to a sense of transcendent reality, as Dr. Moody says, then we have to try to integrate that back into our limited sense of reality. And it shifts. That deep personal experience challenges our existing belief structures. Now, how serious of an issue that integration is depends on our belief structures. The beliefs we receive early in life may sometimes be very rigid, and this is certainly the case for young doctors who can feel at the ripe old age of their mid-20s that their initial training and starter beliefs are actually the last word, and that they themselves have a godlike knowledge and status in society. But as humans mature, they find that the initial beliefs we receive are perhaps only ever intended to be a kind of scaffolding to get us through until we really grow and mature and have our own felt experience in a larger version of the world and the universe. But this relies on not shutting down possibilities without conducting experiments. As Weiss said in his first book, quote, "Years of disciplined study had trained my mind to think as a scientist and physician, molding me along the narrow paths of conservatism in my profession. I distrusted anything that could not be proved by traditional scientific methods. Then I met Catherine." End quote. So, of course, mature scientists and physicians understand that science has evolved and is evolving, even awakening. And spiritual awakenings can happen in many ways, like meditation or any satori or breakthrough that leads people's behavior to drop competition, acquisition, and power, and drop suppressed anxiety and fear, and simply be less hung up and more deeply relaxed in life. So therapies too can then reduce existential anxiety and fear, some of which is a normal baseline in our modern society, but is a subtle form of dis-ease that the spiritually awakened can look back and see and value overcoming as they make their reality more consistently transcendent. And here's what Weiss has to say about the similarity between the effect on people who experience NDEs and or past lives. He says, quote, "The similarity of the changes in values, perspective, and outlook on life that typically occur after the experience of an NDE and a past life recall is also very illuminating. You do not have to be hit by a truck or suffer a cardiac arrest to reap increased awareness of spirituality, decline in materialistic worries, the development of a more loving, peaceful nature, or any of the other benefits that past life regression and near-death experience share. Members of both groups experience a dramatic lessening of the fear of death and express the new and certain conviction that love is what really matters." End quote. The second key similarity between near-death experiences and past life regression is that they do share the experience of death. In NDEs, it's a near-death experience. In past life regression, it's an actual death experience, remembered. Because when we regress to past lives, we also regress to past deaths. In the past life, we don't nearly die, we actually die. We leave the body. As Weiss says, quote, "Patients describing their actual deaths in past lives use the same images, accounts, and metaphors as do the children and adults who have had an NDE. The similarities are astounding, even though vivid past life death descriptions usually come from hypnotized clients with no previous familiarity with the NDE literature." End quote. Now, this is quite true and fascinating. So in past life regression, we do follow the actual death in a past life, and we follow through to the stages that happen after that. They can take us through into between lives. So the typical pattern is, after somebody dies in their physical body in a past life, they rise out of the body and may hover above it and look down. From there, they can witness the actions that happen after their physical death, which can be in the minutes or hours. They may then stay around and witness the aftermath of their death, and that can be days or weeks. extending to actually attending and watching their funeral, or visiting certain people on the earth plane in dreams to say goodbye, or to attempt to convey a soothing energy as people cry or ruminate on their death. Finally, and this can happen shortly after leaving the body or after some weeks, rather than looking down at the earth plane, they turn and look up and are drawn towards a light, and in that they may see their spirit guide or a loved one, a member of their soul group, who can draw them to that light, through it, and into the between lives realm, where they can review that life with the help from their spirit guide soul group and from master spirits in a soul council that can help prepare them for their next life. So in that, past life regression merges into some between lives work. So I'm a past life regression therapist, and that is the process that I see and all my colleagues see continually when we take people to past life deaths and what happens next. So now here is how Weiss summarizes the description of NDEs that he sees as similar. He says, quote, "There's a life review, a panorama of one's actions, behavior, and deeds that is somehow all displayed instantly, beyond time, and in brilliant color and three-dimensionally. In addition, the life reviewer experiences the emotions of the people he has helped and hurt, loved and hated. One or several spiritual, godlike beings often accompany the life reviewer during the review." End quote. So there can be two ways that we go through time when we regress into past times. And we can have moments that transcend time. We go through conventional linear time into a place of timeless wisdom that heals. Now, connected to death experiences are of grieving of those that are left behind. So NDEs make up a large section of this book, but there are other chapters that Weiss goes into about healing, some of which I review in another video. But before I close out this video, I'll look at this chapter about healing the grieving. Here he details a single session that he gave to a young woman of 26 who had no symptoms or no presenting issues she was aware of and just wanted to see what would come up in a past life regression. She relived 3 past lives that were mostly filled with joy and happiness, so she felt she could, quote, "call on her happy past lifetimes to create lasting happiness in this life," end quote. Yet in the course of those lives, she recalled some past life deaths of her own, including a life where she was a child who witnessed the death by hanging of her father, and that past life father was her this life father as well. So Weiss writes, quote, "Martha also told me that to her surprise, the experience had helped her heal a long-standing, lingering feeling of grief and mourning over the death of her father in this life 4 years previously. It had also helped her clarify her own understanding of death. She now knew that she had known him before, and of course that she herself had lived before. The possibility existed that they could meet again. Her experience had proved to her that death as a final ending does not exist. Her father might no longer be with her physically, but she felt uplifted to know that his consciousness lived on," end quote. So past life regression, by going into an actual death experience, can help us with the fear of our own death and the grief around the death of others. The relief of these kind of existential anxieties can have a positive effect on other aspects of anxiety. And though it may be hard to put into words why, it can just leave us with a peace that passes understanding. To get my book, Past Life Awakening, 7 regression case studies illustrate 7 spiritual laws, which you can get as a paperback, ebook, or Kindle, check the links in the description. To have hypnotherapy or past life regression sessions with me, click the link below. To get training with me that includes video courses, technical manuals, session swaps with fellow students, and can include personal mentoring with me, click the links to learn hypnotherapy with my Hypnotherapy Specialist Institute or past life regression, spirit release between lives with my Past Life Awakening Institute.